Welcome to Retro Groove. Enjoy your voyage. Retro Groove.
Howdy and welcome to Retro Groove. I'm Adam C.
And I'm Liam D.
And this is a podcast where we talk about music that stands the test of time, the albums and artists that have shaped and reshaped the sonic landscape, as well as covering new music from those artists. Today, we've got a super episode for you. We're going to talk about supergroups, and we'll define that, and then we will talk about some of our favorite supergroups and go into a few of the more well-known ones, and then maybe a couple that are lesser well-known but deserve some attention. But before we get to that on side B, Liam, you're in Chicago.
I'm in Chicago for Lollapalooza, as odd as that feels in the midst of everything that's going on in the world.
Yeah, what's that been like?
It's a trip. These kids, man, these kids. I'm fortunate enough to not be in the thick of the crowd. I've been able to avoid most of that, although I am in a hotel, elevators, whatever, masked up. But it's cool, man. I've been coming to Lollapalooza for 9 or 10 years now, and I love this city. I love this festival. It's extremely well put together. It's especially for such a massive fest. I mean, the footprint is one of the biggest. We've talked about the European festivals. I've never been to those. I've heard that those are also equally as massive and impressive. But this one is always well executed, and the lineup is killer. And it's right in the heart of Chicago, which is a great city, and you can just get to it super easily. And you know, each year there's a bunch of artists that do the same festivals, and so you might not need to make the hike to Chicago because you can see them at Coachella or ACL or Golf Ball or whatever it is. But Lollapalooza always has a few really unique ones, and this year there aren't as many music festivals. Bonnaroo is coming back, and ACL and a few others. But there are some fantastic artists that, you know, unfortunately I don't get to see a ton of music while I'm here necessarily. But I mean, the Foo Fighters. I honestly, I mean, that was exciting just to see them, and you could tell that Dave Grohl was ecstatic to be playing in front of like 70,000 people or whatever it was. There's like 80, 90,000 people every day at this festival.
Damn.
But honestly, one of the bands that kind of blew me away that it's been a minute is Modest Mouse. I've hot and cold on them, but liked them for a long time. And they came out, man, they've been making music for 25, 26 years now. And they still got it. It was fantastic.
That's awesome.
I didn't get to see Brittany Howard. I really wanted to see her. She is
that would've
so
been cool.
great. I love the Alabama Shakes. And I mean, I posted in the Discord. I was geeking over Tyler's set. Tyler, the creator, was just so cool. Black Pumas. I got in late. I didn't get to see Black Pumas, but I heard the set and it was great. And I heard that the crowd was really good.
I saw some video of it. So
and kids showed up for Journey, which I wasn't.
Nice.
You never know. Yeah, like the legacy acts at these things are kind of touch and go, but I think, you know, they had the hits and they had the presence. But dude, they're like, the way that the festival is laid out is that there's two main stages at either end of the park, so you can kind of choose or go back and forth. Oh, it's a long walk. And it was, I'll say versus, it's not really versus, but it's like, it was Journey and Post Malone. And Post Malone, like, you can't really get much bigger than Post Malone at the moment, unless you're Olivia Rodrigo. But, like, Journey still pulled a great audience. Like, people turned out. But I'll say that, you know, I was out in the crowd a little bit, mask on, trying to be safe. But I think it's partially just the nature of time. I keep getting older, and this audience does not. It's so weird, man. Like, for the past 7 or 8 years, it just seems like the audience stays 22, and I am not that anymore. I am getting older and older.
The older
but
I get, the more a festival doesn't sound like a good time to me.
yeah. But there are festivals that cater to our type as well.
Yeah.
But it is impressive to see that it has established itself in a young generation. If you think about a festival that is celebrating its 30th anniversary, it was created around the like alt grunge era of 90s rock. And the fact that the brand has lived on that long and is relevant today to the point where if you're turning 19, 18, like you want to go to Lollapalooza, like it is a destination thing that
100%.
kids want to go to. So yeah, it's fantastic. No, it's exhausting. I'm gonna be real with you. Like I can smell myself right now, and that's not great. But it's really cool. Yeah, no, it's been a blast.
Okay, so to wrap that up, I probably already know the answer, but favorite performance that you actually got to see
this weekend?
Yes.
Man, I mean the Foo Fighters were great. I really liked Tyler though. Like
I knew it.
Hearing the Foo Fighters come out on stage and watching them. I gotta say, like the artists across the board seemed so happy. Like you just watched their faces, and they were beaming to be seeing thousands of people in front of them. And the Foo Fighters have done a handful of shows, although they did have to cancel one of their shows recently due to a positive COVID test in their on their team. But
I saw that.
But yeah, I think it's like a band like them that hasn't really performed in front of audiences like this in a year and a half. You can see how Taylor was like glowing. Dave just had the biggest smile on his face.
Eating it
and
up.
you could see it motivated them, right? It got them. But yeah, Tyler, his pageantry on top of the music, like he has a presence about him. The stage show is great. Look, I watched a little bit of Post Malone, and I appreciate the sound. He's got catchy songs, but it was just him on a stage, which can be really powerful. But he was Saturday, Tyler was Friday. And to come off of watching Tyler's headlining set where Tyler had like a motorboat on stage that moved around like a mechanical bull and like a fake hotel that he was working in. Like it was a whole thing.
Man.
And then just to see just Post Malone up there with just smoke and you know him spitting off the stage. That's it. Yeah, it was weird. But everybody ate it up. His audience was ridiculous.
Well, yeah.
So, yeah. But,
cool. All right. Well, thanks
time.
for sharing. And, obviously well wishes and good thoughts and prayers that you're good to go and that nobody, that we don't have a bunch of, regrets after these festivals.
Yeah. We'll see, man. Yeah.
Yeah. It's weird. It's still a weird time. We thought it was going to, be on its way out, and now it's back. So it's something we just still have to live with for a while. All right. So obviously, in addition to that, prior to this weekend, anything that you've been listening to that you want to mention, any new purchases?
Yeah, so based off of our last kind of alt hip hop conversation, one band that I didn't bring up that I kind of forgot to bring up, but then as I was kind of reflecting on it, I was like, man, I love that group, and went back, is this band called Das Racist from like about 10 years ago. They released stuff, and then they split up, and I don't think they're ever getting back together again. But most people know them because of like a viral song called Combination Pizza Hut and Taco Bell, which just went everywhere back in like 2011. Is very like Reggie Watts-esque. But they put out like 2 mixtapes and 1 album before they split, and it was just I had fun kind of revisiting it. It's another thing I like to play in the car, and it just feels good. And some of it is safe enough where I can play with my kid in the car, and she likes it because it's weird. They're just saying crazy things. And then so I think we've talked about having artists that we feel like we should know more about or feel like we should have more appreciation of. And The Replacements has always been a band that I'm aware of, but I don't, I haven't been as well versed. I haven't taken the time to really like immerse myself. And I took a shot at it the last week. I had a long drive for like a personal event thing, and so I knew I was going to be in the car for like 2 or 3 hours. And so I started just listening I threw on their albums, and man, I've said on here that I have some tough times kind of chewing on and digesting Bruce Springsteen music,
Right.
but I know that he's an influence for so many of my favorite artists. And then I'm listening to this, and I'm like, oh no, this is the other side of who influenced them, and it's the side that I probably associate with more. I mean, this is a band that sounds like they were making music in the like early 80s, and they sound like I can't imagine Nirvana existing without this band. Like they sound so much like everything that has come in the past 30 years in alt rock and garage rock, and everything kind of traces back to, it's like that ancestor, that like the common ancestor of some of my favorite bands. So
Yeah.
I feel a little bit like an archaeologist where I was aware of it, but I kind of unearthed this thing, and I'm like, oh, now I hear, dude, I'm listening to this and I'm hearing like lyrics and references in songs that I love, that I'm like, oh, that was actually a shout out to this weird like line in Can't Hardly Wait or something. So I went on a kind of deep dive, and I think I'm gonna I think I'm gonna follow your lead, because I've never been like a completionist guy when it comes to records, although it is very interesting to me. And now I'm like, yeah, I think maybe I want them all. I don't know if how daunting that's going to be, but I think like the Replacements might become one of those bands where I'm like, okay, this will be the first one that I go and get every LP and have a complete set.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I only do that with bands that I really, really love. When I think about the Replacements, the main thing that pops out in my head is their drunken performance on Saturday Night Live that got them permanently banned from the show.
Yeah, man.
So it's just that type of energy.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
I love it.
What about you?
Well, again, coming off of our Atlanta hip hop episode a couple weeks ago, I'm still on an Outkast and RTJ kick.
Nice.
I did dig into some Goody Mob and listen to some stuff that I'd never heard before, which was really cool. But yeah, what still perpetuates is the Outkast and RTJ albums.
Yeah.
Also, got reminded of the band The Anniversary because it's Vagrant just released the 20-year anniversary of their first album, and so I've been listening to actually both albums, but more so the second album is the one I'm more of a fan of, and so I've been listening to that. And I was also able to pick up Spoon, Girls Can Tell, which is it might be one of my favorite of theirs.
Yeah, it's a good one.
And has one of my favorite songs of all time, which is Everything Hits at Once. If I had to pick a top 5 songs of all time, that would be on it. So
really, okay,
seriously. So had to have that album. And so that's getting me very close to completing their studio LP lineup. I think that makes 6 out of 8 for me at this point. So
nice.
That's been it. Didn't really get to the record shops. I've been working a lot, and I've got my daughter's birthday coming up. So I definitely did not get to any of the record shops in the last couple of weeks. So it's been it's a little bit slim for this segment this week.
Yeah. Well, I'll say, so the Anniversary, and I apologize if we already talked about it on a previous episode. I don't remember doing so, but like that band, I remember going to see Dashboard Confessional back in 2002. It must have been, and knowing one or two other bands that were playing. I think it was Saves the Day and maybe Hot Rod Circuit, all bands that were on Vagrant, which was one of those labels that I bought everything that I could, anything that I could find at my local Borders bookstore and music store, like I would grab. But I remember the Anniversary came on stage, and it had that like kind of psych rock, pop rock, but it wasn't super trippy. And I'm blanking on the lady's name who's in the band, but like
I don't know any
you
of their
have
names
that
either.
you have that. Well, so it's Josh Berwanger is the lead singer, and he's still putting out records under his like last name. He's got his own kind of solo group thing that he's doing, but she's like a music teacher now, and there was something haunting about her vocals as it layered over him. I mean, we could come up with a million examples of this where you have two vocalists that play. I mean, Outkast is one where they play off of each other really well. But there was this dynamic between the two of them about how she kind of presented her parts and echoed him that it struck me. I remember I went immediately to the merch table. I bought the poster. I bought the CD. I got everything, dude. I cleaned out anything that I could buy from that band that night. I did. Like it was. I was floored by that group. And then I don't think that they ever put out anything else after that as a group. I think they split up pretty soon after, which is it's a real bummer. But like I said, lead singer's still doing stuff. But that's cool. I honestly, I don't know a lot of people who even know who The Anniversary is. So it's
I have
cool
a
to have
similar
someone
story
else
about
there.
how I discovered them too, because I discovered them because they were one of the opening acts at a Get Up Kids show that I went to in
cool.
2000. So
Wow.
it's a great way to find new music.
Yeah, I didn't know you were a Get Up Kids fan. We've never talked about that. We should talk Get Up Kids.
Well,
at
I
some
certainly
point, man.
was, and I'll still go back and listen to Something to Write Home About once in a while.
Yeah.
But
Oh my God, such a good album.
I was definitely that was definitely my thing back in 2000 for sure.
Yeah.
All right, so the community question this week that we were talking about in Discord is what is that music, that group or that album that when you really need to calm down, you've had a stressful day, been sitting in traffic, you're frustrated, what is it that you can listen to that calms you down, relaxes, and de-stresses you?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I know that you've been working like crazy. I've been working like crazy.
Yeah,
and,
a lot.
And honestly, there's times when I avoid music when I'm hectic because I kind of need talk. I need a podcast. I need radio. I need something like that kind of will transport me to like divert my attention in a way so that I can, wash the dishes and do the chores that I don't want to be doing because I'm exhausted. But I was reminded this past week just how powerful something that can teleport you. Like music's always mood altering. If you have a relationship with a band or an artist or a sound, it can impact you. I mean, I'm watching the Olympics now, and they've all got earbuds in right until they hit the pool, or right until they hit the floor.
Right?
Like it's incredible. And so in that same vein, I was listening. I've mentioned him on here before, but I was listening to Lord Huron. I needed something to teleport me and to chill me out a little bit and to kind of find be mindful and find my kind of center, if you will, or whatever. And that band is so good at painting pictures and sonic landscapes where it kind of just takes you out of it, and it's not necessarily telling a story, but it feels like there is one, and there are these undertones of a bigger story. But it just there's an escapism to it. And I have the same relationship with Explosions in the Sky. And Explosions in the Sky, I mean, they're Texas boys, right?
Yep.
If people aren't familiar with them, I mean, they're an instrumental group. So
fully instrumental. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So all you get is the song title or the album title and the album artwork, and everything else is left to your imagination.
Exactly.
But they can do it. I mean, their album, All of a Sudden I Miss Everyone. It's just, there's a song called Welcome Ghosts. And what does that mean? I don't know. Like, welcome ghosts. It could mean so many different things. And it lets me float away. It lets me, I can just kind of surrender to it. So I was curious if you have anything like that you are running around crazy and trying to maintain your sanity, that helps you for that.
Explosions in the Sky is a really, really good answer to that. I'm a huge fan, of course. And they are and there's a reason why they get picked up for so much soundtrack work, because they can evoke so much emotion with no words.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big part of what we're talking about. On the other end of that, where it's just more like, okay, I really just need to chill and not necessarily get, transported or emotional, or have the sonic landscape, painted with such beauty, is that Morcheeba album that I've been talking about for probably the third episode in a row now. Just because, they're down tempo, but it's just so, their beats are really groovy and in the pocket, and her voice is just so soothing and jazzy, and it's just chill out music, like pure chill out music. And I love it. So, that's something great to put on like at night after dinner, the dishes are done, the kids are in bed, and you literally just want to lay on the couch and chill out. That type of album is perfect for that specifically. So,
Cool.
But yeah, I'm 100% with you on Explosions in the Sky as well.
Cool. Yeah. I think it's worth saying that, like, obviously finding time for your own mental health and your own well-being is so important. And to have a routine or having things that you can have in your stable of, whether it's a meditative time or you're taking a walk or something, but to have just another thing in your tool set of taking care of yourself with that is, always good to find something that can be there to help transform your feelings, if necessary.
Definitely.
And you and I were struck. We'll talk a little news here. I mean, you and I were struck suddenly. We might need our own kind of peacemaking. Dusty Hill of ZZ Top, dead at 72. Yeah, just such a bummer. I honestly, I had been told erroneously there was a few minutes where I was told that it was Billy who died, and I freaked out. I freaked out, and then I heard it was Dusty, and I still freaked out. But like and then you're like, well, is it true? Is it because the beards? I think people just get confused a little bit.
Yeah, there's that, but also in this day and age, there's so much, stuff.
Yeah.
Something will go viral before it's even verified to be true.
Right. But yeah, I mean, the crazy thing is that ZZ Top's out on the road. I mean, they started a tour that he was initially on, I believe. I think he did a show or two, and they were like, he's not feeling it. He was having some shoulder issues, some hip issues, some ulcers, this and that.
Man.
And the band had canceled show dates a few years ago because of his health issues. So I don't know. Obviously, none of us know the actual specifics of what went on, but he hadn't been in great shape. And I know Billy had kind of arranged to have one of their guitar tech, I think, who's been with them for years, to kind of jump in and fill in for these shows that they had booked. And then, it's a real bummer that you're never really going to get to see ZZ Top again.
No, yeah, it's especially as a Texan, that's like, that hurts. That hurts a lot.
Man. Yeah.
All right, so we got the sad news out of the way. Let's
get weird.
News. Yeah,
let's get really weird here. So I got two other things I wanted to talk about. So I don't know. Do you remember Pharma Bro? Do you remember hearing about this guy back in like 2015?
Yeah, he was a little. It was a little flash in the pan for a second there.
Yeah, so he made a bunch of money in a terrible way, where he he bought a company or created a company and took a $6 life-saving pill and cranked it up to hundreds of dollars a pill and made a bunch of money off of it, but basically it was a terrible situation.
In the worst possible
I mean, he's
way
in jail.
you could make money.
Yeah, he's in jail. He's been in jail for years. He's serving a 7-year sentence. But so one of the things that he did, because he was not, an Elon Musk esque kind of mentality of it's just I'm not finding the word, but he's a unique man, and one of the things that eccentric, there it is, thank you. He bought a Wu-Tang album, and it was the only
and not
copy,
just any Wu-Tang album.
the seventh Wu-Tang album, Once Upon a Time in Shaolin. And this is before NFTs or anything like this. There's a physical, there's one physical recording of it. There's like this gorgeous box. You have to look up the picture of the box that this thing is in. It's incredible. And they wrote and recorded it for about 6 years, and they decided that they were going to treat it more as an art object. They were saying that, like, streaming and Napster and everything had kind of depreciated the value of a song or of an album, and so they wanted to do the antithesis. And it's very interesting. It's a cool idea, but it's turned into its own debacle at this point. So Pharma Bro buys this in 2015. Then Pharma Bro, and part of the stipulation, so he pays $2 million for this, and the stipulation is that it can't be sold. It can't be like broadcast. You can't put it on Spotify or anything like that for 88 years. He could do listening events. He could do like little, get people together and play it for them.
Oh, really?
But couldn't do anything beyond that. He could just do some listening parties. So he goes to jail. And in reclaiming, the millions of dollars that he owes to people now in these lawsuits, the U.S. government winds up with Once Upon a Time in Shaolin.
Of course it does.
And so that was just auctioned off now, and we do not know how much it was paid for. We do not know who purchased it. Yeah. Wow. So there's mysteriously this thing now has gone into the hands of who knows what, but I just love the idea of the US government having to auction a Wu-Tang album is so great. I mean, like, it's absurd and wonderful. It's
amazing.
such a fun story. And then something else that is completely not surprising is so Kanye West been working on his 10th album. I don't know. Are you a Kanye fan at all? The song,
I don't
like the hits,
dislike the guy, but
Sure.
I've never really been a fan of the music necessarily.
For me, like the first album's great. The second album, I think, is fantastic, and then the third and fifth album are also really great. He has very enlightened moments. I mean, we have conversations about artists being artists and letting them be that, and understanding that they're not necessarily in the same headspace as us. I think that there's boundaries to be set on what's acceptable when it comes to social behavior necessarily, or what.
Of course.
But anyway, so he had announced that he was going to do a listening event last week, and then right after the listening event, he was going to tweak the album potentially and then release it that night. And he did the same thing a few years back in Wyoming. He had a bunch of people fly out, listen to one of his albums, and then he put it out the next day. Like, he created the album art there, like on his phone. Again, like, I like being kept on my toes, and there's always fun things.
For sure.
Like, you just don't know what's going to happen next, and it's pretty exciting, I guess. But so he did not release the album. Did the listening event. Did not release the album.
Oh.
It's been 2 weeks now. And he has been recording it and working on it at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and he's living there. He hasn't left. He's staying there until the album comes out. We're hearing that by the time people are listening to this, it should be out. We're being told it's going to be out August 6th. But again, this thing has been talked about for a very long time, and yeah, so he's got like a mattress and a little desk and everything that he's just sleeping in a room in the arena. And there was like a sporting event there, and he showed up with a stocking over his head. Like, it's just, you got to go on social media and see it, man. But I'm excited to check it out. Again, like, he has these moments of brilliance where he's a fantastic producer. I mean, some of my
I was gonna
favorite,
say.
some of my favorite hip hop albums of that era. I mean, I love Common and B and Finding Forever. He's just he's I don't want to call him a genius, because I think that should be reserved for some other folks. But he's a very, very talented guy with an incredible incredible ability to think in different ways and come up with new ideas. And I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah. No, I have a ton of respect for him as a producer. It's not the music. His music is not something that I enjoy listening to.
Sure.
Regardless of anything else, like literally just strictly musically, it doesn't grab me for whatever reason. But yeah, he's a fantastic producer and obviously a objectively talented person. And I wish him well, and I hope that you know,
if he gets to go home.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know how you live up to that much hype, how your work lives up to that level of hype. It's a lot to come up against.
Yeah.
Well, before we flip it over to side B and get into some of these super groups and some of the fun stories surrounding them, and a tragic story as well in the case of Temple of the Dog. We've got some birthdays to touch on, as well as one very special birthday, which I guess we can talk about on the front end here, is that on this day in 1981, MTV launched, which of course kind of changed the course of the way the country consumed music. Video Killed the Radio Star was the first video that they played, and it couldn't have been a more apt first song to have a video for on MTV. And I can't take credit for the joke, unfortunately, but happy 40th birthday, MTV. Thank you for 15 years of music. But because, after a while in the late 90s, things got weird and started to get less and less music videos, and how that whole thing goes. But, for a good couple of decades there, MTV was kind of the main way that, young Americans discovered new music. And I can personally remember seeing videos for the first time of bands that I had never heard of, and they would almost instantly become my favorite band. And I have so many memories of, watching live performances that changed the way that I thought about music, changed the way that I approached writing music myself. Watching programs like 120 Minutes that played a little bit more of the, kind of underground or heavier music that was, or offbeat, I should probably say, that really spoke to me. And then, things got a little bit less musically inclined once we got into,
reality
shows like TRL, where it's like they stopped even playing the whole music video. They would just play a portion of it. Yeah. So I remember seeing it was a live perform. I think it was Garbage, actually. And it was a live performance, and there was a moment there where I realized that I wanted to make music. It was like, okay, this right here, like this makes me want to create music,
right?
For the rest of my life.
Right.
And without MTV, I don't know that I would have had that moment. And I don't know that I would have pursued, the degree that I pursued and the life paths that I chose. So I at least in part have MTV to thank for that.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like I wouldn't have been exposed to hip hop. I didn't have friends who were listening to hip hop. I remember seeing Busta Rhymes videos. I remember seeing
Oh,
the
yeah.
Diddy videos, the Mace videos, the Wu-Tang Killer Bees, like Triumph.
Yes.
Like it was such a window into other things that were not in my neighborhood, and metal too. I mean, I had one friend who liked Metallica, but like you started to see some of those bands and those artists, and yeah, it's like because I wasn't hearing that on the radio.
Right.
And unless you had a cool older brother or cousin or friend who had one and slipped you a tape or a CD, you didn't hear about that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And MTV was a genius marketing tool that just it succumbed to the natural ratings grab. But I'd say that it is what YouTube is now in many ways. I mean, that's an algorithm, so it's a
Right.
little different. But I go on YouTube and watch music videos now, as does everybody else. And
Well, where else do you watch music videos these days? That's the
but
only
the craft
place
is still
to watch
alive. Yeah, like it still exists, which is cool.
Yes.
It's crazy to think that artists are still making music videos, but they're making it for YouTube instead of making it for MTV.
Right, exactly. And you could, say that MTV became the cutting edge of new music, replacing what before then would have been like college radio, would have been what was considered the cutting edge. So, and now you're right, absolutely right. It's YouTube. It's streaming. It's, you could argue SoundCloud, but like YouTube is still where things go viral.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And speaking of garbage, obviously we've done a great episode on Butch Vig, big fans here, and happy birthday to him.
Happy birthday, August 2nd, born August 2nd, 1957. You want to talk about a couple other birthdays here?
Yeah, I mean, so Jerry Garcia, born on the 1st, and there's a unique thing. I don't know if you're a Deadhead. I'm aware of it. I have an appreciation for the songs that most folks would know. But they, a lot of fans kind of celebrate Jerry's life and legacy this time of year because he was born on the 1st and died on the 9th, and so they call
August
it the
9th,
day.
that's right.
Yeah, August 9th. So the week in between, they call it the days between. And it's cool, when you've got that kind of community. It's a nice thing to rally around. Just like you have your Hallmark holidays where you celebrate this and that. It's kind of neat to have a week every year in a fandom to just say,
for sure.
Let's sit and celebrate the legacy of this band and this guy.
Definitely.
So Robert Cray, fantastic blues musician, born in 1953 on the 1st. Chuck D, Long Island Zone, Public Enemy. Adam Duritz, Counting Crows, also born on this day, 1964. I'm hoping I get to see them at some point in the next year. I think they're going to get out there on the road. Tony Bennett, born 1926, dude.
He's about to turn
95.
95.
Whoa, crazy. And he's still performing. Still
doing it.
It's so crazy. Mentioned Metallica before, James Hetfield. I mean, you want to talk about seeing someone on MTV or seeing some imagery. I mean, I remember they had a music video for the Mission Impossible soundtrack called I Disappear, and James is driving a muscle car akin to what he had driven akin to the Fuel music video. And I was just like, yeah, I need a muscle car someday. I was just like, I want to be that guy. He's the coolest dude in the world. Yeah.
For sure.
Happy birthday, James Hetfield. And then Louis Armstrong.
His birthday is August 4th. Obviously, we lost him a few decades ago, but he was born in 1901.
Wow.
which is insane to think about because
Yeah.
people are listening to his music to this very day.
Mm-hmm.
And he was born 120 years ago.
Crazy. Yeah, it's crazy
So-
to think that music, the history of recorded music or commercial music consumption has been around for a very long time now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Louis, his little compilation of his and Ella Fitzgerald's Christmas songs, that is one of the most played Christmas albums in my house. At least. It may be close. I would say that Vince Guaraldi's Charlie Brown Christmas soundtrack
that's here.
is probably a close second, but honestly, number one has got to be that collection of Louis Armstrong and Ella Fitzgerald doing Christmas songs, and just hearing Louis Armstrong sing "Is That You, Santa Claus?" Fantastic. Nobody else can perform that song. I don't know if you've heard anybody else try to do that song. Doesn't work. Doesn't work. That is Louis Armstrong's song 100%.
Do you have it on vinyl?
I don't have it on vinyl.
Yeah.
I have the CD, actually.
Okay.
One of the few CDs that I do own. Of the CDs that I do own, of like the 8 of them that I own, 6 of them are Christmas CDs.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I wonder. I mean, we haven't done any. I haven't looked at it, but I wonder if it's one that's gotten reprints. That's one that I'm semi-familiar with, but maybe I'll make that my holiday album this year. I'll take a note out of your book.
There's so many good songs on it. It's fantastic. But that really covers everything on side A that we wanted to hit, I think. So I don't know about you, but I am super excited to get into some of these super groups. Obviously, we're not going to have time to hit on all of the ones that deserve to be talked about, but we're going to talk about some of our favorites, some of the most well-known, and hopefully get some new fans for some of these lesser-known ones.
Yeah.
All right, you ready to flip it over?
Let's do it.
Cool. Welcome back. We are on side B of this 6th episode of Retro Groove. I am really excited to dive into this concept of supergroups. We talked about one-hit wonders last time, and this is almost kind of the opposite of that. We're diving into supergroups, and before we dig into any of these bands, I thought it would be a good idea to define what we're considering to be a supergroup, because it's not a cut and dried term.
Yeah.
We really want to try to establish what is fascinating about this and what we really want to be talking about here.
Yeah, let's set some boundaries here, because
Right.
obviously it's art and it's expansive and it can go in a million different ways, and there's so many great stories with these things. But when we're going to be talking about this, I think we're not gonna be talking about these one-offs that happened at charity events. These,
Right.
It's not the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction. It's not
Right.
It's not features on an album or something along those lines. This is really going to be focused on our bands that had pre-established members that then either serendipitously or by design kind of came together and created something that was more than the sum of its parts, but the parts were already big. I mean,
Right.
The Cream often gets the note of the first super group. But I think that that's done a little retroactively. I think
Right.
that looking back at who was in that group, you say, oh, wow, well, they were playing before and then they came together and then 4 albums later, they went off and did so many other things.
Exactly.
But I would argue that none of them, I mean, Clapton, all of them have been playing in other bands, but you can then argue that so many other groups are supergroups by that same design because artists gig around with each other until they find the right fit, and Clapton jumped around all over the place. So
Yeah.
I would argue, gray area, but something like that, I'm going to actually stay away from a little bit.
Right. Yeah. Same here. I think that, if you aren't already kind of an internationally known artist, it's not a supergroup just because you end up becoming really well known and famous and then going off and doing other things later. Your previous project doesn't automatically, like you said, retroactively become a supergroup.
Exactly.
So, the first one, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I have a question based on that I want to throw at you.
Yeah.
Which is, are the Foo Fighters a supergroup? Very tough call, and I don't think I know where I land on this. But it was as I was thinking about this, I'm thinking, obviously Nirvana.
Right.
Nate was in Sunny Day Real Estate.
Sunny Day Real Estate.
Pat Smear from the Germs.
From the Germs.
Rami Jaffe from the Wallflowers. Bob Mould often played with them from Husker Du.
Yep.
Taylor Hawkins was Alanis Morissette's drummer.
Yep.
You had Chris Shiflett from Lagwagon. I mean, every single member who's ever been in this band had already been in a band that, to varying degrees of commercial success or their own identity, I think it's beyond what we just talked about with Cream. I think it's hard to call them a supergroup because they stand on their own so much and aren't defined by that. So my heart goes to they're not a supergroup, but I think by the rules that we just set, they kind of are.
You know what's so funny is you're 100% correct, and that thought never even crossed my mind as I was researching this topic.
And that's why I think they're not. Like, that's why I think I have to vote they're not, because you don't think of them at that. We're going to talk about the Traveling Wilburys, and they are. They're
right,
a supergroup.
100%.
Foo Fighters is it's Dave Grohl's band that he then brought all these other people into, and now they are an established entity. But I think if you're going by the book, they kind of technically are. But I vote they're not. My vote, I think I'm going, is that they're not a supergroup.
I mean, you made it for someone that's giving me a no vote on that. You sure made a good case.
Yeah.
So I was going to say, I'm going to have to give it to them on a technicality.
Okay. Go to technicality. I respect that.
Because, how else do you define them at that point?
Yeah. No, you're right.
So,
you're right.
You're right. There's not one member other than now. I think, the keyboardist is considered an official member of the group now. But other than that,
but that's Rami Jaffe, who was in the Wallflowers for 15 years. Yeah. Yep. So like it's a tough call.
And I didn't even know that Chris Shiflett was in Lagwagon. That was a new fact for me just now.
Yeah.
So I think just that on its own really gave it to them as far as the technical win, the technical inclusion.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. No, it was No Use for a Name, not Lagwagon.
Oh, okay. No Use for a Name.
I think it was because Spike Slaw of Me First and the Gimme Gimmes, who was in a band with Chris Shiflett, was in Lagwagon. I think that's what it is.
All right.
Sorry.
Well, thank you for
No Use for a Name, another punk band.
It's new information for me, so now it's there, and it still counts. As far as I'm concerned, they still get it on the technicality. So. Man,
why don't we talk?
Threw me for a loop, though.
Yeah. So why don't we talk about? I mentioned them before, and I think that you have them here on your list. I mean, the Traveling Wilburys is probably the best place to start for supergroups.
Absolutely,
right?
the best place to start. I mean, probably you could argue the most well-known supergroup if we're talking about all of pop music history.
Yeah.
So. I was actually pretty surprised to find out in my research going back that it really was George Harrison's vehicle.
Yeah, it was George.
It
was
It was
George.
all George. I mean,
Yeah.
it was his idea. He just wanted to make music with his friends. And he invited, and it going back through the history of the group, it all seems so haphazard and like circumstantial. Tom Petty ended up joining the group because George Harrison had to go to his house to pick up one of his guitars and was like, "Hey, why don't you just come along with us?"
So crazy. So crazy.
So,
yeah. I mean, Cloud9. So I think that was the last of George's albums that
Yes.
were released before he died. I remember, let's go back to
1987.
MTV. Go back to MTV for a second. The music video for "I've Got My Mind Set on You," where he's sitting in a Barker lounger or like a armchair, and the whole room, the animal heads, the bookshelves, everything's coming alive. It's like Peter Gabriel's
Yes.
Sledgehammer. And for me, I was a little kid, and it was a mind trip
Absolutely.
paired with this gorgeous pop song, this fantastic pop song.
Timeless pop song.
And so I remember then getting older and going back and finding that album and falling in love with that album. And it was his work with Jeff Lynne on that
Yes.
album. Jeff produced it, that kind of created this spark of, well, what maybe Jeff was working with other artists. I think he was working with Tom or was working with Bob. It's just like organically happened. And they went to go see Roy Orbison, right? And they talked to Roy, and Roy, they all loved him and brought him into it.
Roy
you're right,
was
totally
Jeff Lynne's
organic.
idea. George Harrison chose Bob Dylan, and Lynn opted for Roy. And and again, Tom Petty was just kind of a, hey, come along with us kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's funny, their first song that they recorded, "Handle with Care," was literally named because they recorded that song in Bob Dylan's garage studio. Because there were no other recording studios in the area that could accommodate them on such short notice. They saw a box in the garage that had "Handle with Care" written on the box. And there it is. There's the name of the song.
Yeah. Now, I believe that it was after that they basically did the rest of the album just kind of jamming together on acoustic guitars, right? Like they worked it out, and then Harrison and Lynn had to take that and get some session musicians to kind of flesh out the rest of the album, is my understanding of that. And it's really cool to think that it was such just an organic thing. George Harrison, like you said, the leader of it, pushing the idea forward. But then all of these guys just in awe of each other, who arguably are all on the Mount Rushmore of what is rock and roll or singer-songwriter or whatever you want to call it, folk singer-songwriter, rock and roll. It's incredible that this existed. And then devastating then that, it helps, Handle with Care helps them kind of reinvigorate some of their careers as they're kind of trucking along, especially, Roy Orbison. His hook in that song is so memorable right before, but then he dies. Like it's a massive success, and I think he passed away like a month or two after the album came out, and the band then has to question, like, are we a band? Like, are we going to do this again? Can this exist without him? When it was they were all in awe of him being a part of this group. I mean, he was the elder of the group, really.
Yeah.
But they did, right? They made another album without him, kind of in tribute to him even.
Yeah.
And then kind of went their separate ways.
Absolutely. And I think it's probably good that they didn't try to go on and bring in new members and stuff like that. It was beautiful what it was. And then sometimes if you try to keep something like that going past its shelf life, so to speak, it can mar or cheapen what came previously. So obviously tragic losing Roy, but I'm glad that they preserved what it was.
Like, to have that exist in music history is so incredible, And then obviously we lost George a while after that. But the fact that there is this time capsule, this moment when this happened, that we can kind of go back to. I was listening back to that first album, just kind of in preparation, and it's
same.
It just gives me goosebumps, because I'm like, I can't believe this happened. Now that I have an appreciation individually for each of these artists, it's crazy. And when we're speaking of Mount Rushmores, so there's an equal Mount Rushmore over on the countryside that I'd like to touch on for a second, which is the Highwaymen.
Yes, please do.
It's Johnny Cash, Willie Nelson, Waylon Jennings, and Chris Christopherson. And they go on, I mean, combined, they have 36 Grammys under their belt.
Oh,
and
my God.
and again, another situation where they are just all in awe of each other. The forefathers of the outlaw and alt country movement that I love and so many people love now. And it's just incredible to think that these guys all were able to sync it up, and they made 3 albums. They did this. They weren't.
It wasn't just a one-off thing.
Yeah, they genuinely were able to work it out. Again, we lost Waylon, but ultimately, like it went on for a while. They kept revisiting this, then you had a few years later, even though it had started prior to that, a few years after the Highwaymen, you had the female counterpart to that, which was Trio, which was Dolly Parton, Emmylou Harris, and Linda Ronstadt, who I think they have 30-something Grammys under their belt as well. Yeah. And they go on, they do 2 albums, one then, and then they get back together in the 90s. There's some label disputes. And that's another thing with all of this, right? We're talking not just egos, but the legality of it, right?
Yeah.
And there's some stuff that we can get into on some of these others where the egos really come into play.
Yeah.
But the legality of some of these things creates these roadblocks.
Yeah.
And so Trio, they wanted to, a few years after, put out an album, and they recorded something, and then it got shelved because they couldn't figure out who was going to put it out.
Yeah.
So it sat for like 5 years.
Yeah. It's really sad that those kind of legal entanglements get in the way of what could have been something amazing. Thankfully, we didn't seem to have that issue with the Wilburys. It all got worked out.
Yeah.
But that can really put the brakes on what could have been an amazing collaboration.
Yeah, and then in the same vein, then you go from the Highwaymen to Trio, and then recently, I don't know if you listened to it. It came out, I think it was 2 years ago now. You have the Highwomen, which was Maren Morris and Brandi Carlile, Natalie Hemby, and Amanda Shires. And they take the original Highwaymen sound and give it this kind of female, like new era, what we're experiencing right now. I mean, Brandi Carlile is one of the best songwriters out there right now, a fantastic
100%.
producer, and they pull this group together, and it's a badass album, man. It is really cool. Jason Isbell's playing. Amanda Shires is Jason's wife. She's a fantastic musician in her own right, and she's kind of the George Harrison of the group. She pulled it all together. She's like, I want to do this thing. I want to take what Willie and Johnny did back there. We need to do it now. Yeah. And she brought these other 3 incredible women along with her and put out a great album.
Awesome. Yeah, I was aware of it. I haven't actually been given the opportunity to listen to it yet, but I definitely will now. This is
so good.
So next episode, during the what you're listening to, you'll probably hear that on there for sure, because that's
killer.
Thank you for reminding me of that for sure.
It's killer. Let's talk a little rock though. We did some country. So you have Temple of the Dog on yours.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So for those that are unaware, Temple of the Dog was spearheaded by Chris Cornell, who had already, been successful with Soundgarden. But one of, actually it was his roommate, Andrew Wood, who was the lead singer of Mother Love Bone, died of a heroin overdose in 1990. And Temple of the Dog sort of became a tribute to him. The first songs that he wrote, Reach Down and Say Hello to Heaven, were basically tribute songs to Andrew. So,
right.
Stone Gossard and Jeff Ament, who were in Mother Love Bone, obviously then went on to be in Pearl Jam. He invited them to be part of the band because they were directionless after losing their, lead singer. And they had one album. Eddie Vedder came in and did vocals on the album as well. And then, I don't know that Pearl Jam would have existed without Temple of the Dog.
Possibly not. Yeah.
Probably
Eddie,
not.
Yeah. Eddie got thrown into the formula, and I think it all started to click. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it gelled, and that was, I'm not like really, really familiar with the history there, but I think you could definitely argue that Pearl Jam as we know it most likely wouldn't exist without Chris Cornell and Temple of the Dog. So
for sure. Yeah. And I think that it's also good. Again, you hear good and bad come out of a lot of these situations, but Cornell went on to have a great relationship with that band throughout the years following that too. It was like he went off and obviously was the lead singer of Soundgarden and Audioslave, which we'll touch on here in a second.
Yeah.
But following that, band breakups can be like actual relationship breakups, and you can have some really awful things come out of it. But the band, as they went off and created Pearl Jam, maintained a great relationship with Chris throughout the years.
Yeah.
And then so Chris, then becomes the lead singer of Audioslave after Soundgarden and Rage Against the Machine dissolve. Yeah. And the falling out between Zach De La Rocha and the rest of the band, I don't know if anybody knows the full story there, but I know that the creation of Audioslave was orchestrated a bit behind the scenes. You had some managers and such that were kind of nudging people in the same direction, and Chris has gone on record to say that he it was because of Mother Love Bone and Temple of the Dog, rather, that he was open to the idea of this because he had already experienced like collaborative things being being inspirational and having this greater momentum and this greater ability beyond what you can just do on your own.
Yeah.
I loved Audioslave. Like a Stone is probably their most played and loved song, and I think it's rightfully so. There's a lot of stuff on that first album that does sound very much like it was potentially for another Rage song, or they were writing Rage music, and then Chris just contributed his vocal stylings to it. But Like a Stone, I think, stands out. I don't think that there's anything in Rage Against the Machine's catalog that sounds anything like a Stone, and it's haunting and gorgeous. And then they go on to create their own. They create their own identity over the next two albums, and they wind up putting out 3 albums. And I don't think that the split was. I think it seems like it was amicable. They each had their own their own intentions and things to do. And, Tom's gone off and done his own solo projects, and he does broadcast, and now he's got Prophets of Rage with Be Real and Chuck D. And they each. It seems like it was a fairly amicable split, but I'll say that throughout the tenure of Audioslave, I remember there being talks of breakups and rumors constantly, and I think that is mainly because you had this history of Rage Against the Machine getting into arguments and Chris Cornell being in a bunch of bands, and they almost got a reputation of turbulence. And what happened in many of those situations is it wasn't them, it was their managers or their labels that weren't getting along. Who was going to put out the Audioslave album when they had their own separate record deals initially? And Chris had his own manager and Rage had their managers. And what winds up happening there is they both fired all their managers and got a new manager for the group as a whole.
Well, there you go.
So it's a mess. But another situation where we just have great music that comes out of it.
Oh yeah, definitely turned out to be, something way bigger than just a side project. It took on a life of its own, and they, it's again, this what this podcast is all about. It stands the test of time. You know what I mean? Particularly with Like a Stone. It's just, one of the great modern rock songs, and it will, live on forever.
Yeah.
And, have to again come back to the legal entanglements creating problems where they don't need to be, unfortunately. But that kind of has to be a part of the equation if we're going to define supergroups the way that we have.
Yeah.
So it's almost unavoidable, I think.
Yeah. Now, we've talked about Adam Schlesinger, we've talked about Fountains of Wayne on here a bunch, but Tinted Windows, right?
So
gotta mention Tinted Windows.
For sure. And this may be one that listeners may not have heard of before. So let me, talk about them really quick. Tinted Windows is Adam Schlesinger, prolific songwriter. We talked about him last episode. Fountains of Wayne obviously went on to do a ton of other things musically. One of the, I don't know how many people have been nominated for a Tony and an Emmy and a Grammy. That's a triple threat that I don't think a whole lot of people can put that on their resume, but he is an incredible songwriter, or was, rest in peace. Lost him to COVID last year, unfortunately. But he, I believe it was 2009, and traveled to go, I believe, to a songwriting session with Hanson. Yes, Hanson of MMMBop fame. And so out of that came this idea to put a group together and create an album, as they had some commonalities between them. And the kind of the sound that they immediately said, okay, if they're both keyboardists, they said, if we're going to do this, no keyboards. That was like one of the rules going into creating Tinted Windows. This is going to be a rock band. We're not going to have any keyboards. Yeah. And so they recruit, of all people, James Eha of Smashing Pumpkins.
And A Perfect Circle,
on lead guitar, and A Perfect Circle. And so when they're kind of, okay, so the rhythm section, what they talked about was we need somebody with that Cheap Trick swagger. And then so I believe it was Adam who said, well, if we're trying to go for that sound, why don't we just call up Bunny Carlos of Cheap Trick and see if he'd be interested? And his wife was like, "You're too busy. You can't do this project as well. Like, what are you doing?" Yeah. And it happened. They created this probably what would seem like the most ragtag or mismatched group of musicians. But when you listen to it, oh my God, does it work?
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like Cheap Trick, a little T-Rex in there, kind of some glam rock. It sounds incredible. And I just was jamming this album in the car, and it is so good. The hooks, I mean, Adam Schlesinger is one of the reigning kings of creating incredibly catchy hooks, and it shines all over this album. It is just so good.
Yeah,
So,
and Taylor Hansen is a great. I mean, say what you will about Hansen. He's a smart businessman, but he's also a great singer and can write a pop song too. And
Absolutely.
so when you put the two of them together, it's one of those situations where I do feel kind of greedy and wish that there had been more. And now obviously there never will be. But it does leave me wishing that maybe we just had one more album, or even like a grouping of outtakes or B-sides or something. I wish that there was something else from this project, because it could have had that momentum. And it's a bummer that it never did.
Yeah, especially because in interviews, there's some allusions to them creating more in the future. And whether those writing sessions or recording sessions ever happened, we may never know. And it clearly never panned out, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But it was at least mentioned, I believe, by Taylor in interviews that they were working on or planning on working on new music. So it was at least in the works.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to touch on? I know we're kind of starting to run out of time, but I know we've sure got a few that we want to talk about.
Yeah, I'd like to jump over. I mean, hip hop is weird because there's not a whole lot that fit the criteria. So I feel like I'll touch on a couple things here real quick, but I'm not going to go too deep because like Black Star is a collaboration between Mos Def and Talib Kweli.
Right.
But neither of them had really put out any solo projects. They were just underground rappers who were starting to establish themselves. So it's not technically a supergroup. It goes back to that. When you look back in hindsight, especially given the time, you're talking about 97, 98, real big glam, that fisheye lens on MTV and
throwing
and
money
like,
everywhere.
Yeah, Diddy everywhere. And these guys were just raw. It sounded like they were on the street corner, and it's a great album. But again, like a super group in hindsight, but not at the time. And then I threw on, Watch the Throne. Like it's technically not a group. It's Kanye and Jay-Z doing a collaborative album together, but it also is its own thing.
Yeah.
If there were to be a Watch the Throne 2, you know what it is.
Right.
So I'm not going to put it under the title of supergroup, but it is very close to that kind of definition. Same with Danger Doom, although Danger Doom's weird. Danger Mouse has been a part of Broken Bells. He's been a part of a bunch of groups, but he's usually takes an instrumental and a producer level role, and so I don't think that you can even consider Danger Doom to be a supergroup. But there was a group, and there was one album back in the late 90s called Lucy Pearl, another one that most people don't know much about. But it was Raphael Sadiq. It was supposed to be D'Angelo, and then Ali from A Tribe Called Quest. And then again, this is one of those ones where it got really messy and the wheels fell off. They had two singles that came out, but like it didn't work out with D'Angelo's schedule, and so Raphael went and found somebody else, and it was one of the ladies from In Vogue, extremely talented, and bringing a female voice into the group was great. And then it honestly, it sounds like egos got in the way. They started doing press. It started doing press, and each one wanted their own spotlight. And they would go into an interview and they'd start asking Ali about A Tribe Called Quest, and Raphael might not like that so much and stuff. It's dicey when you take it to that next level of doing a tour. Most of these artists that we're talking about never really toured. They didn't
lot of them
go
didn't.
into it. Yeah. Audio Slave obviously did, but most of these others didn't do a whole lot of that.
Yeah.
And so that group kind of fell apart right after the album came out. But some great songs that were off of that project, and a really cool kind of neo soul R&B sound from that time. Raphael Sadiq, super talented.
Yeah, he's great. I didn't know that D'Angelo was supposed to be part of that project.
Yeah.
That was news to me. That's cool.
Yeah.
Cool little factoid.
And then the last thing, not hip hop related, but just like I'm a massive Bright Eyes fan, and I remember hearing about the Monsters of Folk collaboration with Jim James of My Morning Jacket and M. Ward of She and Him, and it's a great album. It's exactly what you would expect it to be.
Right. Right.
None of them are. I mean, My Morning Jacket's huge, and Bright Eyes obviously is big in the indie alt scene. Yeah. But we're not talking anything like Traveling Wilburys or Highwaymen or any of that stuff. I don't think any of these guys have a bunch of Grammys or anything under their belt. But a fantastic album that definitely worth mentioning. Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any that you want to touch on?
Yeah. Again, others. I think probably the biggest that I wanted to touch on at least briefly that I haven't gotten a chance to mention yet is Them Crooked Vultures, which for those that don't know is Josh Homme of Queens of the Stone Age, and obviously Dave Grohl on drums. And, they're friends and they've collaborated with each other for a long time. And, Dave played with Queens of the Stone Age for a while on drums. And then John Paul Jones of Led Zeppelin. I mean, my goodness. Talk about,
an icon.
Exactly. Legendary, rock, talk about Mount Rushmore, you know what I mean? He's probably deserves a spot on there. Yeah. So that is kind of one of those that I think will stand as a one-off album that is fondly remembered, but we'll probably not see that happen again. I don't think there's going to be a second Them Crooked Vultures album, which is kind of a shame because it absolutely rocks. I mean, it's a fantastic album. There's some great songs that came out of that. But definitely worth mentioning. Another one that I wanted to touch on is Zwan, Zwan, for those that don't know. So, post Smashing Pumpkins, before before Billy kind of reworked it and brought them back from the dead, so to speak, was Billy Corgan and Jimmy Chamberlin. Jimmy Chamberlin being the drummer of Smashing Pumpkins, wanted to create a group and make an album and tour, and they put together. So David Pajo, for those that don't know, I got to see him live actually relatively recently. Oh, cool. Amazing. He opened for Mogwai, actually. For those that don't know, David Pajo originally in Slint and has been in a bunch of projects. He was in Stereo Lab for a while. I mean, amazing musician, and I'm a big fan of his. But he was in the group Paz La Chantine.
Paz, yeah.
Yeah, she's amazing bass player currently, and has been for a long time, the bass player for the Pixies, or the current iteration of the Pixies. Yeah. But she was in A Perfect Circle. And then Matt Sweeney also in the group, the guitarist from Chavez. So they put out kind of a one-off album, and if I'm remembering correctly, they actually broke up mid-tour. I don't even think they finished their tour. And they, obviously whenever you've got Billy Corgan involved, the egos are going to butt heads, and there's going to be disagreements, and, amazing musician, amazing songwriter. Smashing Pumpkins is one of the biggest, alternative rock bands of all time. Billy Corgan is known to be a bit of a diva, big ego, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, or let's just say in a nice way, can be difficult to work with.
Yeah, very particular about stuff.
But
Yeah.
made some fantastic music. And again, another one that I think we will probably never hear from again. Smashing Pumpkins having reformed and Pause with the Pixies. David Pajo doing his own thing as a solo artist. And I think they're all doing well independently, and they don't probably need to revisit that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
And then-
Billy and Jimmy are still in Smashing Pumpkins, as far as I know. So, or I think Jimmy is still, yeah. So,
Yeah, and James as well.
It could
James
happen
Eha
if
is
they
back.
decided to. Yeah, but if James went off and did his thing, would there be another Zwan project? I love that album. There's so many
it's
good
so
songs
good.
on that album. I remember picking
Really
that
good.
up, like hearing the song honestly. And I was a Smashing Pumpkins fan, but it had this very power pop kind of sensibility to it that I was like, oh, this is a Billy Corgan I don't know and I want more of. And the whole album's fantastic.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like Smashing Pumpkins. It is definitely its own thing. So I'm glad that we have the album, but yeah, that's definitely one of those one-offs. Last one that I want to talk about here is Oysterhead. Now, Oysterhead, for those that don't know, is Les Claypool of Primus, of course, but a solo artist as well. And he actually was asked to put together something for the New Orleans Jazz Festival. That's what it was. And this is the group that I mentioned earlier in the episode, where originally it was intended to be a one-off performance.
Right.
And if it had been, they wouldn't fit our criteria for the
Correct.
supergroup. But he contacted Trey Anastasio of Fish. And so they talked about it, and they're like, all right, who can we get to play drums for us? And the name that they come up with was Stuart Copeland of the Police. And it's like
The Police, yeah.
You know what I mean? So they
That's a
came
cheap
together.
trick situation where they're just like, let's ask him.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's the kind of sound that we want to go for.
Yeah.
Well, let's at least shoot for the moon. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they did it, and they came together for that performance at the New Orleans Jazz Festival. I was reading that scalped tickets for that performance were going for $2,000.
Oh, wow.
Famous people, including Francis Ford Coppola, were in attendance. It was a really big deal.
Yeah.
And so it was such a big deal that they, decided, okay, this is a thing. Let's record an album. And actually twice now they've had their tours canceled, or their intended tours canceled. They were going to tour in 2001, got canceled due to 9/11. They were actually going to tour again in 2020. And we all know what happened in 2020.
Yeah.
So, hopefully we'll eventually get more Oysterhead material. But that album, it's definitely an interesting fusion of styles, but it works really, really well. And it's a fun album. Even if you're not into Primus, even if you're not into Fish, it's really, really fun. It's a great, jammy, jazzy, fun album.
Yeah, they're one where I do think we'll get more music. Like,
I
out of
hope
all of
we
these
do.
that we're talking about, I don't think we've touched upon anything that we feel optimistic about ever getting anything else, be it old recordings or new music. But I think this is a good one to leave off on, where it's one that, the future might be bright here. Like, this could happen. Trey likes getting into funky things. So does Les, and
for sure,
Stuart's a weird dude, and I think I think there's. If I were to put money on it, I'd say it probably happens.
Okay, so this is right off the top of my head, but so to wrap this up, if you could create your own supergroup.
Oh man.
And we didn't talk about this beforehand, so this is going to be complete, and we're probably both completely exhausted. I know I am.
No, it's good. It's
11:30 at night.
Yeah.
Okay. We're just real off the top of your head, of all the existing living artists, the best supergroup with at least 3 members. Go.
Well, I'm gonna I can cheat here a little bit because I have or had on my desk at work a Funko Pop like hypothetical band. That one actually had Stuart Copeland as the drummer. I don't think I'm gonna go with that for this one, but it was James Hetfield of Metallica on guitar,
Okay.
and Mark Hoppus of Blink-182 on bass.
Man.
It was I mean, like, I don't know what that would sound like, but it would be pretty cool. Gosh, who's on?
Okay, so who would play
though?
drums in that
Yeah,
project? Because
who's on
that's a cool
drums?
combo.
Yeah.
Speaking
who's
of
on
which, I
drums?
was just seeing that it looks like he's responding well to the cancer treatment. So,
Oh, good.
Good thoughts and
Yeah.
prayers for Mark Hoppus.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the cop out for drums is Dave Grohl. I don't think I'm gonna go there. I'm gonna say maybe like a Chad Smith. Like, Chad is really fun and he's a great drummer. I like the Chili Peppers. I'm admittedly not a huge Chili Peppers fan, but I'm a Chad Smith fan. So I think I'm gonna throw the 3 of them together and just see what comes out.
Man.
It could be like throwing a bunch of things in a pot and you wind up with something that is unpalatable. But off the top of my head,
could be.
I like the idea of having metal mixed with the kind of pop rock side of things with a little funky grunge thrown in there.
Definitely.
Like, it could be really weird. What about you?
Definitely. Okay, again, and having that question literally just completely off the top of my head to wrap things up, and I have not put any thought into this whatsoever. So I think I'm going to try to reawaken again, kind of going back to what we talked about in the Tony Hawk episode. I want to try to reawaken the rap and rock hybrid when it was new and exciting, like, when we had Run DMC and Aerosmith collaborating, and when we had Public Enemy and Anthrax collaborating. So I want to take. I was going to say Buckethead, but I think with your recent, posts on the Discord about Limp Bizkit, I think I actually want to go Wes Borland on guitar.
Wes Borland. Wow. You could probably get that one together. Yeah.
Let's start with Wes Borland on guitar.
Okay.
We need a bass player, but we don't want to kind of go the same kind of new metal route with bass. We need somebody who can be in the pocket. And I almost want to go a little bit crazy and pick somebody jazzy like Thundercat.
Okay.
Like, maybe let's do that.
Yeah.
Because they're both very, intricate and percussive players. So it might be a little bit much, but let's just roll with it. And then I want a rapper. I don't want a singer on the mic. So I don't know who that would be. Maybe if we could get somebody like either like LP or Aesop Rock, somebody with some more kind of off kilter lyrical stylings and something that you have to kind of look over and read a few times and make your own interpretations of what they're trying to say. And then if we're doing that, we need sort of a drummer that can do the hip hop thing. What are we thinking for a drummer?
Well, I feel like I want to change my drummer answer now, but I feel like it also needs to be yours. So it's probably Questlove.
Oh,
it's probably Questlove.
it could be. I mean,
yeah.
Talk about hip hop drummers, maybe one of the most well known.
Yeah.
I don't know that I want to go with a purely like hip hop drummer though.
Okay.
I think Questlove
then I'll take
would
Questlove.
work out. Yeah, you can definitely take.
Yeah.
He's
Sorry,
great.
Chad.
I love him.
Yeah.
But you can put him in your group. I think that
Cool.
works really well. I might go with. I want to say maybe like the drummer for the Deftones, whose name is escaping me. That could work.
Okay. Yeah.
So with that really, really loud snare, or potentially maybe a Travis Barker.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, Travis has done so many things lately with hip hop and punk stuff. Like Travis is becoming a tastemaker in like the alt and alt hip hop scenes.
Like literally,
right now. So
I would go
he could do
just to
anything.
see Travis and Thundercat together, and that's it.
Yeah.
Like,
I kind of really want that. Like my band seems weird or whatever. Like it would be fun.
No,
to
it
see
seems
just 'cause I don't
cool.
know what it sounds like, but yours, I'm like, that could probably happen. Like I don't know if Wes Borland and Thundercat are gonna hang out, but like, but I could see Travis and Thundercat doing something. Like
That would be dope.
That's I like it. I like it a lot.
all right, well, that's the best that I could come up with, just
Yeah, I dig it.
completely off the top of my head, and I had to,
Great.
stammer a little bit there to get my brain moving, but
Yeah.
it's late. We're at 11:35 p.m. right now,
Mm-hmm.
and I think we have accomplished our goal to
Yeah, totally.
talk about our favorite supergroups and some of the most well-known, and hopefully made some new fans of some well-deserving supergroups.
Yeah.
And any parting thoughts or anything that you'd like to add? Because, this was a good one.
This is a good one. I think the only thing is just in line with what you just, the little exercise that we just did, is there is something exciting to think of what could happen in our lifetime, because it is neat to look at the Wilburys and the Highwaymen and to say, wow, like I know those artists individually, and also they loved each other and were in awe of each other and worked together. Like look back, 30, 40 years to see that. But I wonder, in the artists that have established themselves now, I see John Mayer playing with the Grateful Dead now, and that's not a super group. I wouldn't consider it a super group. He's just, it's kind of like
an amazing collaboration.
It's like Vince Gill and the Eagles. Like it's just a cool collaborative thing that's happening. But to think that will probably happen in some shape or form to some of the artists that we know now, it makes me excited for. Again, we were talking about Kanye and letting artists be creative in their own way, but what some of our favorite artists have in line and what might collide in the future could be really cool.
Yeah, that's definitely exciting to think about. So,
yeah.
All right, man. Well, you probably are ready to take a shower and hit the hay.
Shower. Yeah.
Not just your sweat, but probably 100 other people's sweat on you.
Gross.
All right. Well, this was so much fun, and appreciate you listening, and I hope you enjoyed the episode as well. Retro Groove is part of the RetroLogic network. Check out the website, retrologic.games, for social links, merch, community, and more. And we will see you next episode. Adios.
Bye.